You know, I never imagined it would all fall apart in a kitchen. I thought if things were going to end, they'd unravel slowly, over time, in hushed arguments or tired silences. But no, it all changed one evening. A few sharp words, a look I'll never forget, and a whisper that sent me reeling. Her name was Tara. We'd been together 5 years, married for 3. For most of that time, I thought we were solid. I mean, yeah, we had our off days. Who doesn't? But I never saw the cracks for what they were. I told myself every couple goes through rough patches. I thought we were just tired, just busy, just human. But that night, Tara looked me in the eye and said, "I can't stand you anymore." Not yelled, not cried, just said it. Flat, cold, like she was reading it off a grocery list. We were at her friend Miranda's house. Miranda had invited a few people over, some old college friends, a few neighbors. I didn't really want to go, but Tara insisted. Said we hadn't been social in a while, that we needed to reconnect with people. Turns out, reconnecting with people meant her talking and laughing with everyone else while I stood by the drinks table pretending to text. I'd been feeling it for a while. That drift. Like I was becoming a piece of the furniture in her life, not the man she once swore she couldn't live without. We used to talk until 2 a.m. about nothing. We'd laugh at dumb movies. She used to touch my hand just because. That night, I reached for her hand, and she moved it away, like it was instinct. But I stayed. I always stayed. Because that's what you do when you love someone. After an hour or so, Tara came over with a glass of something, red wine, I think, and asked, "Can we talk?" We stepped into the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes sharp. I braced myself. I thought maybe she was going to bring up the usual stuff, how I'd been distant, or how she felt like I wasn't present anymore. But no, "I can't stand you anymore," she said. I felt it in my chest, that sudden vacuum where your breath used to be. I tried to respond, but my mouth wouldn't work. So I just stared. "You always act like everything's fine. Like if we just keep pretending, it'll all magically work itself out. But I feel stuck, and I don't want to feel stuck anymore." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stood there, like she was freeing herself. And me? I was just standing there with my hands in my pockets, feeling like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. Then came Miranda. She must have heard some of it because she walked into the kitchen with this awkward smile, like she'd just stepped into the wrong room, but didn't want to admit it. She glanced at Tara, then at me. And for a second, the three of us just stood there in silence. That's when it happened. Miranda stepped closer, looked me dead in the eyes, and leaned in. So close I could feel her breath against my ear. "Wait for me outside," she whispered. I blinked. She pulled back, gave me this look, part warning, part something else I couldn't read at the time, and walked past me. Tara didn't even seem to notice. She was staring into her wine glass like it held all the answers. So I did what Miranda said. I walked outside. It was dark by then. The stars were out, but I didn't look up. I just stood by the curb, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. My wife had basically ended our marriage in front of her best friend, and that best friend had what? Invited me outside. Why? The night was still, quiet, just the buzz of porch lights and the occasional car passing by. I stood there with my hands in my jacket pockets, heart still thumping in that strange, offbeat rhythm it gets when your world's been knocked sideways. And then Miranda stepped out. She was calm, collected, still holding a drink. She walked over like we'd planned this, like I hadn't just been emotionally drop-kicked inside. "I'm sorry you had to hear that the way you did," she said, softly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something different in her face. Not pity, not concern, something else. Like regret maybe, or understanding. "I didn't know she was going to do it like that," she added. "She's been unraveling for a while." Unraveling. I echoed. My voice cracked a little. Miranda looked away, took a breath. "She's been unhappy. She doesn't know how to say it the right way, so she just lashes out. You didn't deserve that." I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. I just stood there like some guy outside a party he didn't want to be at, in a marriage he didn't recognize anymore. Then Miranda turned to me and said something that knocked the wind out of me a second time. "She's been talking to someone else. Not physically, not yet, anyway, but emotionally. She's been somewhere else for a long time. I told her to be honest with you. She didn't listen. I didn't say anything. She kept going. And now she's burning it all down instead of facing it." Something about the way Miranda said all this made me believe her. Maybe I shouldn't have. But I did. I believed her. You didn't deserve to be blindsided like that, she said. You deserve to be loved by someone who actually sees you. She stepped in closer, her voice barely above a whisper again. That's why I told you to come outside. You didn't need to be in there for what was coming next. What was coming next? I asked. She was going to spin it. Blame you for everything. Make you the bad guy. I've seen her do it before. I wasn't going to let her do it again. Not to someone who's done nothing but try. I didn't know Miranda well enough to read her intentions fully. But in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. Not admired. Not desired. Just acknowledged. She reached out and touched my arm. Not flirtatious. Not possessive. Just a small human gesture. Something to say, hey, I know this hurts. Then she said, you don't have to go back in there. Not tonight. Go home. Sleep. Process. Don't fight. Don't beg. Just give yourself space. So I did. I walked away. That night, I drove back to our place, her place now, I guess, and slept on the couch. I couldn't bear to sleep in our bed. I couldn't bear to look at the photos on the wall or the little notes she used to leave me. Everything felt like a museum of something dead. The next morning, she didn't come home. And maybe that was the biggest answer of all. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and stared at the empty chair across from me. I didn't feel anger yet. That came later. All I felt was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of trying to guess what she needed. Tired of wondering when things changed and why I hadn't seen it sooner. That day, I called in sick. I wasn't really sick. Not in the way my job would care about. But I was sick of lying to myself. And that felt like enough of a reason. I opened my laptop. Started looking at places to stay. Short-term rentals. I wasn't ready to pack up my life. But I also knew I couldn't stay in that house much longer. Later that afternoon, I got a text from Miranda. You okay? I stared at it for a long time. Then typed back. Not really. But thank you. She didn't respond right away. But a few hours later, another message buzzed through. If you need someone to talk to, I'm around. No judgment. And that's how it started. Not the unraveling that had already begun, but something else. Something I didn't understand yet. Something quieter. Something real. But I'll get to that in part 2. This is where the first part ends. In that strange limbo where everything you thought you knew gets shaken loose, and all you can do is breathe through the dust. The first few days after that night were like living underwater. Sounds were muffled, everything felt distant, and time moved in strange, uneven spurts. Some hours dragged, others vanished. I kept waking up at 4 a.m., without knowing why, just this feeling in my chest, like something was unfinished. Tara didn't come home for a while. A day, then another. I didn't reach out. Not because I didn't care, but because, somewhere deep down, I realized it was already over. Her silence was its own kind of confession. No yelling, no apology. Just absence. Miranda checked in again. A short message. She's staying at her sister's. Just so you're not left wondering. I stared at that text, and my hands didn't know whether to clench or go limp. I typed back. Thanks. Not surprised. She replied. Let me know if you need anything. Seriously. I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to need anything from anyone. I was still trying to feel solid under my own feet again. But here's the thing. In the weeks that followed, Miranda kept showing up, not physically, but in the little ways that counted. A text every few days. A check-in. Never overbearing, never too much. Just enough to remind me that someone out there still saw me as more than the guy who got left. And that meant more than I could admit at the time. One evening, maybe 2 weeks after that kitchen bombshell, Miranda asked if I wanted to grab coffee. Just coffee. Neutral ground. I hesitated for hours, pacing my apartment, staring at the message. But I said yes. I didn't dress up. I didn't do anything different. I just showed up. Tired. Guarded. Still a little raw. She was already there when I arrived. Corner table, nursing a cup of tea, reading a book. She looked up and smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, I've been waiting for this moment, but the kind that says, hey, it's good to see you. I sat down and said, this feels weird. Miranda laughed, gently. Only if we make it weird. We didn't talk about Tara right away. We talked about the barista's terrible mustache, about how the cafe's music was stuck in some kind of acoustic loop purgatory, and about books we pretended to have read. It was easy. Too easy, maybe. Eventually, she asked, have you talked to her? I shook my head. She hasn't reached out. She's probably waiting for you to. I nodded. That sounds like her. Miranda sipped her tea and leaned forward. You know, I wasn't going to say anything that night. I didn't plan to get involved. But when I saw the way she spoke to you, I couldn't stay quiet. You didn't deserve that. I looked at her, and for a second, I didn't feel like the broken one in the story. I felt like someone worth defending. I'm not perfect, I said quietly. None of us are, she replied. But being imperfect doesn't mean you deserve to be discarded. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. That night, after we parted ways, she sent me one last message. You're allowed to heal, however long it takes. And somehow, that message stayed with me more than any apology ever could have. Over the next couple of months, things unfolded like the slow turning of a page. Tara eventually reached out. A long, carefully worded email. She talked about how things had changed, how she didn't recognize herself, how she was sorry, not for leaving, but for how she did it. She admitted to talking to someone else, emotionally, not physically, her words. Said she was looking for something she felt she had lost in our marriage. Said she should have been honest sooner. I didn't respond right away. I reread her email half a dozen times. I cried once. Then I didn't cry again. I just sat with it. When I finally replied, I kept it short. I appreciate the honesty. I wish it had come sooner. I don't think we need to drag this out. Let's handle it like adults. She didn't argue. We started the paperwork. Quietly. Cleanly. No fireworks. Just signatures and silence. Funny thing, when something ends in a slow, quiet way, people expect you to be fine. Like the absence of a dramatic finale somehow means you should be over it faster. But grief doesn't care about volume. It just sits with you until it's done. Miranda never pushed. Never acted like anything was owed. But she kept showing up. Little by little, I found myself looking forward to her messages. Then her calls. Then the walks around the park we both lived near. We didn't jump into anything. It wasn't like that. It wasn't a rebound. It was something else. One night, we sat on a bench, watching the sun slip behind the trees. I turned to her and said, I keep waiting for the part where I messed this up. She laughed. You think there's a timer? I think I'm still carrying a lot of weight, I admitted. She nodded, her gaze soft. Then let's walk at your pace. That line, that simple, quiet sentence, was maybe the most loving thing anyone's ever said to me. And we did. We walked slow, talked slow, let it happen in real time, not rushed or forced. It was healing, without being labeled as healing. It was just human. One night, months later, after things had settled and the papers were finalized, I ran into Tara at a bookstore. We stood in the same aisle for a full minute before she noticed me. She froze. I gave a nod. She walked over. Hey, she said. Hey. There was a pause. That kind where both people have 1,000 things they want to say, but none of them matter anymore. You look well, she said. So do you. And that was it. No accusations. No unfinished business. Just two people who once meant everything to each other, now just passing through. As she turned to leave, she looked back and said, I hope you're happy. And I said, truthfully, I'm getting there. So yeah, that's how it all went down. A whisper in a kitchen. A woman who left. A friend who stayed. Not every story needs a villain. Sometimes people just lose their way. And sometimes, the real twist isn't in the betrayal. It's in the quiet resilience of starting over. I used to think strength was holding on. Now I know, real strength is knowing when to let go, and trusting that what's meant for you might just find you in the stillness that follows.